Certain terminology comes up in Kashmir over and over again. One is half widows. Who are half widows?
Well, half widows are those women whose husbands have disappeared or have been victims of enforced disappearances in Kashmir over the last 20 years. They're called half widows because these widows cannot remarry until the deaths or of their whereabouts of their husbands are proven. So they cannot get divorced and they cannot restart their lives.
And does this also prevent them from getting any kind of government assistance since the death of the spouse or the father or the uncle or the brother cannot be determined?
Yes, they cannot get any remuneration. They cannot, ask for some sort of a relief from government or any agencies because they're not seen as widows or they're not seen as having lost their close ones.
Are there any mechanisms in Kashmiri civil society that would offer assistance or counseling to these women?
Well, organizations like Jammu Kashmir Coalition of Civil Society or APDP under Parveena Ahangar, they do help these organizations, but also there are different sort of religious charities that offer some help, but it's definitely not adequate and they cannot really rebuild their former lives. And although there are certain cultural mechanisms through which these people can be helped, but societies being conservative as they are, these victims are sort of double victims.
Double victims. And in terms of remarrying, that might be also very difficult since the death cannot be determined.
Yes, I think that's one of the major problems they face, that after 20 years or 18 years or 17 years of the disappearances of their husbands, they cannot get married again. And even if they do, then they cannot claim any compensation for their lost ones.
According to Khurram Parvez of the Coalition of Civil Society, thousands of Kashmiri women have been raped. What kind of counseling services are available to them?
Well, one of the most notorious mass rape happened early in the 1991 in Kunan Poshpora, which is a village in the border district of Kupwara. Indian soldiers laid a siege to an entire village and raped the women, around 60 of them. And Indian government later on, after sustained protests, sent in Indian Press Council delegation, which, without meeting the victims, announced that no rapes had happened. And what it led to was silencing of future victims of rape in Kashmir. And the only other instance which openly came to light was in 2009 when two women in Shopian were raped and murdered. But Indian government also, again, after several independent organizations proved that rape and murder had indeed taken place, they established that it did not happen. They instituted CBI commission, which really without regard to any evidence and circumstances, they proved in their own way that it hadn't happened.
What are custodial deaths?
Custodial deaths are those people who are arrested by security forces and tortured in prisons, and if they die under sustained pressure, these are custodial deaths.
And encounters?
Well, there are two kinds of encounters. One is a real encounter where militants and Indian troops exchange fire, but then there are what are really the more notorious ones, the fake encounters, where soldiers capture militants, arrest them, and kill them later in custody, but announce to the news media that they were really killed in an encounter, in a real encounter.
One of the things that's very striking when I go around in Kashmir is when you come across checkpoints, army checkpoints, or watchtowers, or barracks and the like, is the depiction of Hindu iconography and Hindu religious slogans. Now, India is ostensibly a secular state, and the army is supposed to be a secular army. What about that? Have you noticed that?
Yes, of course. I mean, Kashmiris have seen the wrong end of secularism for many years now. I mean, if you look at Amarnath Yatra, which is this cave in southern Kashmir and is one of the Hindu shrines, government makes sure that hundreds of thousands of Hindu pilgrims all over India visit that shrine. They deploy tens of thousands of soldiers for its protection, although it doesn't need protection because Kashmiris are very hospitable. They have never asked these pilgrimages to stop. But when it comes to, for instance, for Muslims praying in the Jama Masjid in Srinagar, there have been many times when Jama Masjid has been closed for many Fridays on end. But obviously there's a deep sort of attachment by these the camps, Indian military camps. They are establishing these small temples. Oftentimes they play loud devotional music, Hindu devotional music, often in response to Muslim azans in the mosques. So it is definitely there is a cultural element, religious element involved in this equation.
And of these hundreds of thousands of troops and security forces that are in Kashmir, what do you know about them? What kind of contact do ordinary Kashmiris have with them? And from what communities do they come from in India?
Well, most of these these Indian soldiers are the foot soldiers, especially come from poor lower caste backgrounds, who are themselves, their own families are suffering out of malnutrition. I mean, there have been like more than 200,000 farmer suicides in across India, and these are the regions where these soldiers come from. And the most often the officer corps is the upper caste, Hindus from India. But yes, there are many Muslim soldiers as well in that.
But in terms of interaction, do you ever have you had any conversations with these soldiers, or is it always a confrontational, superior, subordinate, follow orders?
Well, growing up, I definitely had many conversations, but not of political nature. I mean, politically, you often, differ, and it was not obviously advisable. Our parents would often say, "Don't talk politics," even if they talk to you. So my family would often offer water and stuff to passing soldiers, but other than that, there was a huge resentment of their presence. I mean, many times Kashmiri women, while passing in front of the security camp, would have to put on the veils. Otherwise veils were not part of the traditional women's dress in Kashmir. But these were seen as foreign people in front of whom you had to put on something. And Kashmiri men were often taken for forced labor by Indian soldiers while building their camps, building their bunkers and whatnot.
Psychologically, what does it mean to live under occupation?
Well, Kashmiri society really has been fragmented by this occupation. It's been a huge burden on the Kashmiri populace. Right now, there are thousands and thousands of mentally disturbed people in Kashmir. In the only mental hospital in Kashmir, the psychiatric ward is always full of people coming from all different places in Kashmir, and all of them have some or the other connection with the conflict in Kashmir. And there are numerous cases of people who are really now physically broken. I mean, over the years, many people forget that apart from the 70,000 people who have been killed, there are hundreds of thousands of those who have been injured, and many of them have lost a limb or an eye or something like that.